So, um, yeah, thank you so much to Simona for asking me back to do this today. The talk has been one that has kind of morphed and changed over the last year or two, and I'm really proud of kind of where it's got to today. And I really hope that what I'm about to take you through will help you guys to understand your markets better, to use digital tools basically to understand the markets better, to find business partners, investors, potential people that can help you during your research in the most kind of efficient manner possible. I will explain a little bit about me and where I come from in a second. But before I do that, I'll just quickly take you through this slide and just say, make sure you connect with me on LinkedIn. I'm very happy to answer any questions that you might have outside this session. So if we're going to go through an awful lot today, so if there's things that kind of come a bit too rapidly at you, or you're not quite sure what I said, please just feel free to kind of connect with me on LinkedIn outside this session and ask away. So the talk is entitled Developing the Ultimate Online Toolkit for Researchers and TTOs. And we have boiled this down into what we call a methodology or a process, which we have entitled the impact methodology to go with this space that we work in. It was created by myself and my colleague Jeff Skinner from London Business School, and we both kind of go out and talk about it out and about together, and also separately like I am today. So just to very quickly to kind of give you a history of, why am I here speaking to you about this today? My journey starts with this horrendous picture of me and my business partner. This is me here on the left-hand side and my business partner, James, on the right-hand side, when the fashion was obviously black. And we studied computer science at University of Exeter, which is in the UK, at the bottom southwest of the UK, so about 200 miles away from London or thereabouts, in a much prettier part of the country, I have to say. So we studied computer science between the years of 97 and 2000, which, if you can cast your mind back to then, was a very interesting time around for the internet, because it was the time where people were starting to commercially begin to use it. And interestingly, we created a web design business when we were at university, and the first year of my career I basically spent telling people that the internet wasn't going to be a fad and that it was around for a while. So yeah, it's a bit different to kind of how it is now. So this is a more up-to-date photograph of the business that we created when we were back at university. The company was called Optix Solutions, is still called Optix Solutions. And we have a few more people. We started off in a bedroom, me and James, literally, with a couple of computers. And now we've got a team of about 25 people and about 4 office dogs. You can see here Spud, who's one of our French bulldogs, one of our office dogs. We have about 4 of these office dogs, and when they're in together, no one gets any work done, basically. But it's a lot of fun. And that business started off as a web design company and moved into being a marketing agency, and that's what it is today. That business is now 25 years old, which is quite incredible. It turns 25 in July this year, which I'm really proud of, and also kind of pinch myself every now and again to say I can't believe it's still going, all these years later. And what I guess it's allowed me to do over that time is become a thought leader in the space of digital marketing, because that's what that business does. And nowadays that business has a managing director, so I've managed to step back from it slightly, and I now have the privilege of being asked to come and do things like this or speak on stages across the world around this topic. So I've been doing, as you can see, quite a lot about AI within marketing recently, but equally I've been doing a lot in the university, the academic, the research and TTO spaces as well. So this sort of started for me about probably 8 or 9 years ago, when I first was asked by ASTP, which is the organization that Simona mentioned, to do some talks around how could TTO offices use digital tools to well, it says there actually, research propositions, research markets, find partners and investors. And I got asked to do this every year after that. So I've been doing this for about 8 years now, and immersing myself in that market where I start to understand the challenges that, you know, researchers have, the challenges that academics have, the challenges that TTOs and KT professionals have as well, has just meant that I've been asked to do lots of work by lots of different universities, which has been really, really interesting. And it's, you know, it's not my day job, but it's a very, very fascinating part of what I do, and I love doing it, and it kind of gets me out of bed in the morning. It's certainly become a passion. So yeah, lots of experience there. And Simona and I, as she said there, we met on ASTP, but actually did some work together at the university. This was taken a couple of years ago in your beautiful country, which I've come to love very dearly. Yeah, as I say, a couple of years back. So let's get into kind of the content of this. So this is the agenda that I put together. Obviously done the introduction. I'm going to start off with 2 hypotheses, or observations, maybe I should call them, and I'll come back to those in a second. And then we're going to get into a series of tools that you can use to take you through this process or this methodology. And impact is the acronym that we will use. So I stands for initial organization and automation. So those are all the tools that fall into that section. Then we've got market profiling tools. Then we've got persona mapping. Don't worry if you haven't heard of the word personas yet. I'll explain what that is in a minute. Awareness raising. So how can we get people to understand who we are rather than us going out and finding people? Contact finding. So when we do want to find people, how do we do that? And then finally, giving ourselves the best opportunity to create good quality conversations with people when we do contact them, or even just to get the best engagement, you know, the likelihood of people writing back to us, responding to us, giving ourselves the best opportunity to get a higher hit rate really for that area. So that is the impact kind of methodology, and I'm going to take us through each step one at a time and build it up as we go. And I'm really aware that there is an awful lot in this presentation. So I describe it later on as a fire hose of information, which it really is. So every time we get to the end of a section, you're going to see this slide, and this slide is going to have an action, and I will stop, pause, and go through the action just to help us bring this together into kind of a more formulaic process that we can use to actually help ourselves use this methodology. So before I get into the actual methodology and the tools themselves, I just want to make a couple of observations, if I may. So the first one is that we're actually, and I have had this slide in for a few years, and I question whether I should take it out, but actually I still think it's very relevant. So we are still today living in one of the biggest culture shifts that business has ever seen. And this is down to multiple generations effectively being at work. And I'll come back to what I mean by that in a minute. Now, about a year ago, I changed this slide, and so you can see the change if I just go back and forward again, to include the word technology as well. So not only is this the biggest culture shift, but it's also the biggest technology shift that I think I can probably ever remember. And that's because obviously, you know, things like AI starting to come into the world that I live and breathe, and just the huge benefits that these tools kind of offer us. So let's just talk about this really quickly. And secondly, you know, and Simona alluded to this earlier on, this may well be one of the scariest presentations that you've ever seen. So she said it was, maybe for you guys it will be as well. We'll see. So let's talk about the culture shift and it first. So at the moment, we have 4 different generations who are in the workplace. Okay, we have Gen Zs and millennials. So these are the kind of people that typically actually I employ. We have lots of these people in Optix in that agency, and these are the guys that are completely dialed in to the digital world. You know, they don't actually know anything prior to the digital world at all, because they weren't around then. So when it comes to kind of using digital tools, they are just completely dialed into it. And these are the guys that in my office will quite happily sit with their headphones side by side and talk to each other via some sort of messaging app when they are literally a foot apart from each other, and they could just tap each other on the shoulder and have a conversation. But they will do this via Slack or Discord or WhatsApp or whatever it might be. So, you know, these guys are dialed in to the digital space. You've then got my generation, which is Gen X, and I remember, I'm 45, so I remember a world pre-internet, but equally I grew up at an age where the internet was coming in, and I learned a lot very quickly about it as well. So I think we're the best generation, actually. I would say that, but I'm the one that can kind of flip, or we can flip between those two kind of, you know, the digital space and the offline space. So, you know, my staff laugh at me quite a lot when I jump up and I want to write on a whiteboard or a flip chart, because they just don't do that. You know, they do Miro boards and things like that. So, but I like it. You know, I think it's a good way of kind of communicating. So that's Gen X. And then you've got your boomers, who are the generation above Gen X, and my parents would fall into this. And this is a sweeping generalization, because I'm very aware that there are some boomers who are very tech savvy, but you have to remember as well that the boomer generation did a lot of their work pre-internet. So, you know, a lot of their working days were pre-internet, and that meant that they were catching up with technology, and some even today still struggle to get a bit of a grip on it, which is demonstrated here by my lovely mother, my beautiful mother, here, who I just honestly, I cannot understand why she can't get her face in the middle of the camera. But this is basically what I had to look at during COVID years, and even, you know, beyond. Whenever I do a FaceTime with her, I see half her face or 3/4 of her face, not the entire face. So typical kind of boomer action, that. But as I say, I'm making a slightly sweeping generalization there as well, and I appreciate that. So why is this generational knowledge so important? Why do I go into this before I get into the tools and the methodology? Well, for a few reasons, and I'll put them up here. Every aspect of those areas, so market research, being employed by, employing, finding investors, finding partners, marketing, all of these different aspects will have touch points in those different generations. So, you know, if I'm finding an investor for my new technology, and that investor is likely to be in a certain demographic or a certain generation, the way that I find that person, the tools that they're on, the websites that they go to, the social media that they frequent, is going to be different than if they were in a different generation. So having an awareness and an understanding of the fact that different generations do things in a different way is a very, very important place for me to start before I get into the next stage. So I just wanted to kind of begin with that process bit, or that point, before I get into the process. So let's talk now about the ultimate toolkit. And as I mentioned earlier on, people have likened this to a fire hose of information. So get ready. I'm not sure if you're sitting there with pens, or if you're not gonna be able to remember this, so because there's a lot. You're obviously going to have the slides, you're going to have the recording, so you can go back to it, and if you don't want to make notes, that's absolutely fine. But I will just sort of start this process by saying there is a lot here. Now, in order for me to demonstrate this methodology, I need to take a project. Okay, so about a year ago, or might even be 2 years ago now, I was working with Jeff, the guy that came up with the methodology with me, and he had worked with an academic that had created this real project, or was working on this real project. So they called it Alpha Sperm. And basically, it was an AI method of identifying sperm that were going to be more or better for artificial insemination. And I don't know this market at all, by the way, but my understanding is that before this technology, this was literally, and I couldn't believe this, blew my mind, but literally down to a trained technician to look through a microscope and look to see which might be the best sperm before AI was brought in to kind of do this. Now, as I say, I'm not an expert in this space, but it was a really interesting project to put through the methodology. So the rest of this presentation is going to be based around alpha sperm, and we're going to use that technology to understand how to use the rest of or how to work through the methodology itself. So let's begin with I. So I is for, from impact, is for initial organization and automation. Now, basically, what I want to try and get across here is, or try to encourage, I suppose, is there are tools out there that will help you to organize yourself and to automate certain information coming to you rather than you having to go out and find it. And so those tools fall into this section I. And really, for me, when I'm thinking about a project, I want to have those tools available and set up in the right way so that when I go and do the rest of the pieces, if I find something of use or a person, I have somewhere to put them. So that's what I is all about. And it starts with this tool, which is probably one of the most, in my opinion, one of the most important tools to have. Now, it's also not cheap. It's called Sales Navigator. It sits on top of LinkedIn. So it's part of LinkedIn's suite of products, and they charge somewhere between about 70 and 90 euros a month for this. It's really aimed at business development professionals, but for me, it fits in this model really well because it's a bit like having a CRM of people, but it's better than that in that it has all of those people are linked to LinkedIn and all of the data and information and content sharing and all the things that you can see about someone when you go and look them up on a platform like LinkedIn. So for me, this forms the bucket that I put people that I want to speak to about my project. Now, we can talk a bit more about who those people are as we go through this, but think of, you know, who are the likely investors? Who are the business partners? Who are the collaborators? Who are the people that might buy my product? Or who are my competitors even? I probably want to keep an eye on those as well. So these are all people, and these are people that I would store in this software. So there are two areas of Sales Navigator we need to touch on. The first one is called accounts, which is the bit that's ringed in red at the moment. And an account is a organization. And if I go to this screen, a lead is an individual. So an account is an organization and a lead is an individual. Now, an account can have multiple leads associated to it. So if you think about a very large company in your space, in your sector, and it might be that you would put the company into, you'd find them on LinkedIn or Sales Navigator, you'd put them into your accounts list, but then you might want to have multiple people at that company in your leads list. So it might be someone who works in R&D, it could be a director, a C-suite, CEO, CCO, whoever those people are. And so you can have multiple leads that fit within the accounts. So to demonstrate this and it really is a very quick demonstration of this. To demonstrate it for this project, I started to think about what are the type of accounts. And at this stage, I'm guessing pretty much. Now, you guys, obviously, you know your markets. So you will probably have a really good idea of who these kind of accounts should be. But in the interest of the Alpha Sperm project, I started thinking about sperm banks. I thought about medical universities. I thought about fertility clinics. These are the kind of lists that I should probably start to build out. And then in terms of leads, it might be that there's a fertility or people who fall into the fertility researchers category, who are the kind of people that I might want to reach out to. So that's point one, is really kind of have some bucket for somewhere to store things. There are two other tools which I would like to tell you about for storing information. Now, this one's called Evernote. I appreciate there are lots of note-taking tools out there. I'm not suggesting that Evernote is any better than any of those. If you have a tool already, fine, that's no problem. But at least have one, because when you are out and about and you don't have time necessarily to store something that you found, or someone's told you something that you need to remember, having a tool to put that information is really key. So I use Evernote. I use it on my mobile phone. And whenever I need to try and remember something, it's my go-to to do that. The other tool I like is a tool called Feedly. So Feedly also has a Google Chrome plugin. So what Feedly does is, when you find something that a web page or a blog article or an event or a newsletter or something that you want to store, but you don't really know where to store it, Feedly is your answer. So Feedly, as I said, with the Google Chrome plugin, I could be off there researching my market, finding a website, finding a blog article that I think, wow, that's super interesting for my project. I need to read it, but I don't have time to read it now. So I'm going to store it in Feedly, and then I can go back later on and do so. So it's a really good repository, I suppose, for storing content. And those three tools together mean that I can store people, I can store notes, and I can store content. So I set them up initially to get me going. The next three tools are automation tools. So rather than you having to go and find information out, these three tools are going to help you by giving bringing information back to you. So the first tool is a tool called IFT, and IFT stands for if this, then that. If this, then that. And wherever I can, by the way, I've linked to these tools at the bottom, so you can either write them down or look at them later on. So what IFT does is, they call them recipes. You can create these recipes. So here you can see two wet recipes, real life recipes for me. And you can see how long ago I actually created them, a long time ago, and they still run to this day. So this one here, and these are personal recipes. These aren't work related, but the process is the same. So this one here says, if the BBC website, so the BBC is the broadcaster, the main broadcaster in the UK. If the BBC website on its rugby pages, I'm a rugby fan, mentions the word Exeter, I want you to send me an email to my email address. I don't know why it's cut it off. And so what that means is Exeter Chiefs is my rugby team. That's the ones that I support. So if the BBC mention Exeter Chiefs for any reason, so injury news, new signings, whatever it might be, I get an email immediately sent to me to tell me. I don't have to go back to the BBC every day just to check and make sure and see whether they've got anything or not, or anything's happened. So think now, in your worlds, what would it be useful for you to have in terms of the projects that you're working on, the research that you're doing, what would it be useful to get information coming back to you rather than you having to go out and find it? You know, are there any websites that you go to regularly, for example, you know, that could replace the BBC in this example, that when they mention something to do with the technology or the research that you're doing, that you want to know about it before anyone else does? So think about those sorts of areas. Google also have a tool called Alerts, where it kind of does the same thing. It's not quite the same. I'll try to explain it here. So I've used the words or the phrase IVF to do with obviously fertility. Now, what Google Alerts will do here, and it's a free tool, is it will basically send me an email anytime that Google indexes a web page with that term, whatever term I've put in there. When it indexes a page with that term in it, it will send me an email. And you can change the cadence of it as well. So you can set it to do it every day, every week, every month. And again, that's really useful. So in the example of IFT, you need to have a website that you're telling it to go and get the information from. In the example of Google, it's going to tell you whenever it indexes that word from all around the internet. And that's quite, obviously, could be quite useful. And then the final one, and I don't know if the days are numbered for this tool or not, because this tool, Hootsuite, is predominantly for Twitter or X these days. And who knows where that's going, let's be honest. So although in the academic space, it probably is still going to hold out a little bit longer than maybe some of the other places, which is quite interesting in itself. But Hootsuite is a great tool if you do use X and you follow, say, thought leaders, or you want to follow particular words or phrases. It's a good way of filtering out all of the other noise, because let's be honest, X is a noisy place to be. Personally, I don't spend much time there at all anymore. But if I was going to, I'd use a tool like this to get rid of everything other than what I wanted to know about. So Hootsuite is a very good tool for kind of creating that filter. So we come to the end of I, and I can be summarized really by ensuring that you've got these tools around you, so that whenever you go off and do anything else, you have these spaces to collate information, to repositories to put information, so that you know that you're well organized, whether it's around people or content or notes, and also to get this automation kind of coming into you. So then we move into M, which is market profiling. This is the area where we start to use tools to understand things like the size of the market, what trends are there in this space at the moment, who are the key players, who are the key competitors, what are the challenges of the individuals that we want to talk to. This is the area where we look at those things. And for me, this is all about immersion in a market. So it's generally about using tools like Google to go off searching to really understand what people are doing, what websites are out there, what those websites say. And quite often it will end up in me going through a bit of a rabbit warren of websites and research, but it's often fascinating to do this particular part for a particular project, and it always leads me into spaces that I just can never believe that I've ended up in within, you know, an hour of doing this. The reason I say Google, by the way, is because its market dominance is still so high. It's whatever anyone thinks about Google, positive or negative, it's very, very good at what it does. And you know, there are tools like Bing obviously Microsoft Bing, which are gaining traction, by the way, because of AI. But I still come back to Google as the tool that I want to use to try and find out what is out there in this market. So I will use this now in a couple of ways, and I just want to highlight a couple of things that I'm looking for, because if I'm running a project through this methodology, I'll probably spend at least a day in this space. It's not something that we can kind of get into in the next 10 minutes. So, I might start. I need to start off by searching for phrases that are important for the technology, the project, the research that I'm doing. So in the alpha sperm example, I started off by searching for IVF, because IVF is one of the phrases that, or terms that people would use if they're looking for help in this space. So I want to know who turns up for these, and funnily enough, the NHS in the UK turn up number one, which you would expect. But also I look at things like this number up here. So you can just about see here that IVF has 180 million results, which to me gives me some insight into the size of market, and that in itself is quite useful. So, I've worked on some really niche projects over the 8 years with academics and researchers and TTO offices where the market size is clearly very, very small, and maybe they hadn't necessarily realized that was the case, but we found that out when we were in this section of the methodology. I want to highlight a couple of other things when you're doing Google searches. So you might have seen this section called People Also Ask. Basically, what Google is trying to do here is surface questions that people have asked that have your phrase that you are searching on within them. And these questions, if I were to hit the arrow button here, these questions would drop down and be coming from specific websites. And those in themselves might be websites that I want to go and look at and potentially learn from, or just view. The reason it's important is because the world of search, and there are some other examples during this presentation, but the world of search has moved from being one where people search using keywords, so single words, sometimes multiple words and key phrases, through to questions. And Google and Bing and all of the other big search engines have moved much more towards trying to get people to ask questions. So when you see this, people also asked, it's definitely worth scanning down to and seeing what the websites are that these questions are being raised from. Here's quite a good hack for you. So a lot of people would never have known this, or never know this. You can use Google to search within a certain website, typically if that site allows it, but usually they do. So you can see here that I am searching for the term fertility treatment within the website Forbes. Now, I haven't chosen Forbes for any reason other than just it's a site that a lot of people know. So you would probably be looking to search within websites that are much more specific to your technology or your research. Okay. So, but this is more about the process of what you can do. And you can see here there was 181 results within Forbes. So basically 181 articles probably on Forbes that have something to do with fertility treatment. And where that's useful for me is, and I come to one here, is when you find those articles, the article and the content itself might be interesting, but actually I think even more useful for me quite often in these projects is who wrote them. So we can see here that this article about fertility was created by this lady here, Lee, but then it was also backed up by an infertility expert, Laura Shaheen, because Forbes obviously placed a very high emphasis on quality content. So they make sure that, you know, it's not just anybody is writing about things to do with health. And then what I would do is I would take the author of that content and use Sales Navigator or LinkedIn, which I've got from my I section, to look up those people. And then what I would do when I find those people is look through Sales Navigator to see whether we have anything in common. So Sales Navigator shows you more information than LinkedIn does. It tells you about how you're what relationship you are likely to have with that person, whether they have shared any recent activity. That's good, because then you can talk about that if you reach out to them. There you go. And then most importantly, I want to put that person back into my bucket of people that I might want to speak to at a later date. So I had set up this section, if you can remember, called fertility researchers. So I decided that when I was doing this process that I would put Laura into that bucket or into that list, because maybe I don't want to talk to her now, but I might want to talk to her later on. And if that later on is 6 months' time and I've forgotten about her, that's no good. So at least this way, I'm not going to forget about her, because I can go back to that list. And you can just keep creating this and building this up over time around your research. This is also the time in the process where I might start looking for competitors to my technology. So interestingly, when I took on the AlphaSperm project, there actually wasn't very much in terms of competition, which is good, I guess. I did find this company, a company called Life Whisperer. So you can see here, AI enhanced fertility. But interestingly, it wasn't about the sperm, it was about the embryos. So they were using AI to determine embryos most likely to have success. My technology was about the sperm. So then that gets me thinking, possible collaboration, maybe. Who knows? My job, by the way, today is not to say this is the precise, answer for this project. This is the exact way that I would do it. This is more about demonstrating the process and way of thinking to help you in your particular projects and technology itself. So Life Whisperer was quite interesting to see. And every time I find one of these companies, again, in the same way that I looked up the author of particular content, it might be that I look up the person that runs that company. So this was actually a different business, but it was the owner of a competitor. So again, perhaps I put that person into a list called competitors, just so that I can keep an eye on what they're talking about over the next year or 2 years, or however long I'm involved in this particular project. I wanted to highlight at this stage a cool little tool that actually sits on top of a tool that you might know exists. So let me go through it. So Trends, Google Trends, is a free tool and anyone can access it. You go to trends.google.com or even google.com/trends and it'll get you there. Trends, out of the box, let's call it, so simple version of it, will allow you to search on one particular term and do it over a period of time and even within certain countries or worldwide. However, there is a really cool bolt-on which is called Glimpse. So Glimpse, Glimpse, Glimpse. And what you're looking at here is Glimpse. Now, it's bizarre because it looks the same as Trends, but it's not. So it allows me then to put multiple terms in and then track the trend lines of multiple terms. This is useful because if I have a project that has a number of ways of describing that project or that technology or the area that I want to go into, the space I want to work within, then I can start to use trends to understand what the rest of the world is doing when it comes to these particular phrases. You know, are they using these phrases at all, or are they completely unknown to them? And you can see here, interesting. Well, I suppose it's not interesting in particularly in this example, but fertility is it trends at a much higher rate than fertility treatment. Okay, that goes without saying because it's more generic. But actually, what I would say is more interesting is if I were to scroll down the page, you start to get information like this, which is really useful. So on the right-hand side here, we can see what they call or class as related queries. So we can see that I'm searching on the words fertility treatment, but actually it's telling me other related queries that have something to do with my phrase. So you can see at the time I did this, which was probably 2 years ago, there was a lot of people out there searching for information around the COVID vaccines and the world of fertility treatment because they were obviously worried about that. Now, if I was bringing the technology to life during those years, having an understanding of that at that time could be incredibly useful for me. I'm not saying it would be, but it could be. And that's where I think trends helps you. It's quite macro, it's quite big picture stuff, this, but I think it's useful to know the tool exists so you can go looking. The other thing it does here, which is pretty cool, is it shows you where in the world people are searching for these terms more than others. So you can see here that for fertility treatment, Japan was out there at the top. Then it was the UK, then the UAE. Now, would I have known that as the researcher with that technology? I don't know, maybe. But if I don't, then having an understanding of that so that maybe I can reach out to partners and investors in certain countries beyond the one before the ones that I thought I would go to could be quite useful as well in terms of knowledge. I'll move on from that one. This one's quite interesting. So Glimpse, oh yeah, there you can see how it's spelled there. Glimpse also shows you which channels, and a channel is basically just a word for a social media site or platform, which channels get the most traffic for that particular phrase or trend. And you can see in this instance, so I'm still looking at fertility treatment, TikTok has the most traffic for it. Then it's Instagram, then it's LinkedIn, Reddit, YouTube, etc. So what that means is that when I'm thinking about where do I go and do my research, if I don't know that TikTok is massive in this market and I'm not a TikTok user myself, I could miss out a huge opportunity to learn, to find people, to find investors, to find partners, purely because I've just sort of said no because it's not my tool of choice. So there's a really big part of marketing in the area that I work in where I have to say to our clients and the people I work with all the time, you have to take yourself out of what you're used to and use these tools to help you understand where things are happening and go to those spaces rather than just stick to what you know and what you feel comfortable with, because otherwise you might miss out on these huge opportunities. To end off on this this part as well, there's a really cool website called explodingtopics.com, and explodingtopics.com basically is a newsletter, and it doesn't have every single topic, obviously, but you can search within particular industries and particular sectors. So I'm searching within health here, and once you subscribe to it, every Friday it sends me an email which shows me the websites that are exploding in trending in that particular sector. Now, for me, this is fascinating for a start, because particularly in things like tech, because I want to know about the latest tech before everyone else finds out about it. But I think from a project perspective, and I'm not saying there always is a topic that will relate to your research, but if there is a topic that broadly relates to your research, it's kind of useful to know what else is happening in that space elsewhere. So that's why I kind of highlight that tool in this section. We're still in M, but we're at the end of M. And this particular piece is quite interesting. So I put here the tools to find out how people search. It's predominantly one tool, really, but there are a kind of a variant. Now, what I mean by this, let me go back to this sec. Whatever you believe is the word, the phrasing, the keywords that define what you do and what you're going to take to market or potentially take to market at some point. Whatever you think those things are, you can be pretty sure that the rest of the world may be searching on those, but they're probably searching on loads of other variants of those phrases as well. And quite often, they're searching on completely different things to the ones you think they will be. I'll give you an example. There's a popular project that we work with at ASTP, which is a technology that someone has developed called, we call it the augmented mirror technology. And basically, it's an augmented mirror that has like a ghosting of someone behind it that talks to the person that's in front of it. So you can imagine, if you've created this technology, the kind of people that you're going to sell it to are people like museums, visitor attractions, all of those kind of places. Okay. So when we run that project, we talk about all of those kind of potential investors and buyers and partners. So I go through my entire process thinking augmented mirrors or augmented reality mirrors is my term. You know, that's what I've been calling it. That's what Jeff's been calling it. That's what Sean Fielding, who runs the project's been calling it. Everyone's calling it augmented reality mirrors. When I get to this tool and I put it through it, I suddenly find out that people are calling it other stuff like smart mirrors and magic mirrors and other things that I would never have called it. Now, what that means is that, let's say, and we're going to get to the next section in a minute, that you're creating a website or a web page to define and tell people about this wonderful research and technology you're creating. If you don't call it the things that other people are calling it, those people are not going to find you, because they're out there calling it smart mirrors and you're out there calling it augmented reality mirrors. So having an understanding of the rest of the world is super important. And we use this tool, Google Ads, to do this. In order to access this, you have to pretend that you're going to use this for advertising, okay? So we're kind of using this as a workaround, but it's so good, it's worth doing. When you do that, you don't have to pay any money or put any credit cards into it or anything like that. You can just access it and never turn anything on. And what that does is it gives you access to this part of it here called Keyword Planner. So if I go into Keyword Planner here and I type in the word fertility, you can start to see down here, it shows all of the related terms that have something to do with fertility. So we can see ovulation, IVF, which is obviously one that I'd searched on earlier, ICSI. I mean, I'm not an expert. I'm sure the researcher would know what these things are. IUI, again, I'm not the researcher, I'm not the expert, but these are perhaps surfacing the kind of terms or ways that people explain or define the technology or research I'm doing in a different way to that I do. So using this, and if I were to scroll down, there would be hundreds of phrases, literally hundreds. It also usefully, I think, tells you the number of searches that people are doing on those phrases on Google for any given month. So, and that's useful because then you can understand the competitiveness of this. So you can see that, you know, for example, let's have a look. IVF has 10,000 to 100,000 searches on it every single month in Google. That is a lot. However, IUI has between 1,000 and 10,000 searches per month, which is still a good amount. But what that might mean is that I need to be using the words IVF rather than IUI. And there are lots of things that I could kind of consider in this process, but the tool is the thing I want you to know about. So it's a really useful tool. You can, if you don't want to go through the process of signing up and doing all that stuff, you can have a basic level of this without doing too much. So you can go to Google and you can start to type in something called like fertility in this instance. And then what drops down from there are all of the most popular key phrases that people are putting into Google with your term at the front of it. So you can almost like create your own version of this list here by just doing it automatically yourself on Google for free. But there'd be a manual process to that and it would take a lot of time. So you can do that though if you want to. So this second section, which is almost certainly the largest as well, which is about this immersing yourself in the market and working out, you know, those things that I said earlier, the size of the market, who the key players are, who the competitors are, really understanding what this space looks like is really, really key. And for a latter part of the process, you know, maybe we're looking for people that we can talk to at an early stage before our research gets too far to understand, you know, does this technology I'm thinking about bringing to market, is this going to solve a problem, or have I got that right? Have I got that wrong? If I can talk to people early in the process, I can find out if what I'm going to do later on is going to work or not, or maybe I need to change the direction that I'm going in. So that's that piece. The P stands for persona mapping. Now, persona is a marketing term, so I need to kind of explain it for a second, but it relates to this whole process as well. So a persona is a fictional character. Okay, it's usually in marketing, it's your ideal customer. So in the instance of Optix, my company, we have two personas, Joe and Charlie. Now I'm not going to read these out, but you can kind of you'll kind of see if you want to scan them. Basically, what this means, understanding our personas at Optix, means that every time we create any sort of content, whether it's a blog or a website or a video or anything like that, we think to ourselves, will this help Joe? Will this help Charlie? Would this get in front of Joe? Will it get in front of Charlie? Is this the kind of thing that a Joe is searching for help about? And if you walked into Optix today and talked to the 25 people I mentioned early on, every single one of them knows who Joe and Charlie is. That's how important they are. And we don't market to anyone else other than these two people. And that means that we spend our money in the right place, and, you know, because we really understand who these people are. This is an example of what a persona looks like. So Joe and Charlie have a version of this in our business. You know, usually, and this is actually a real life persona for Exeter University. This is for some, I think it was a degree or continued education. That's right. It was like a post-grad degree, I think. But what we were trying to do here is understand the kind of people that would come on this project or postgrad degree. So we gave them some demographic information. We sort of looked at, you know, what brands they might be into, what websites they might go to, what social media they were likely to be on. And then most importantly, we worked out what their challenges are, or their pains, sometimes we call them. And then we think about the content that we can create on the Exeter University website, which will solve those pains or solve those challenges or answer them, and bring those people to us to come and do our wonderful postgrad degree. So who could you create personas for? Why am I telling you about this? For me, I think when you get into this next section, which is going to be about finding people, we need to have a good idea, a clear idea about who the people we're trying to find are and what they look like. So what does a typical investor look like? What does a typical partner look like? A licensee? I've just put those in as examples. Who are those people? What would make up their version of this? You know, how, and the closer you can get to this, the more likely that you are going to spend your time in the right spaces, the right places, the right websites, the right social media to get to the right people. There's a great tool called Make My Persona, which is by a company called HubSpot. It's free. And what that tool will do is it will ask you questions about your investor partner, whoever you choose to do a persona for, and then it will create something that looked like the Exeter University one I showed you a minute ago at the end of the process. So you don't need to worry about how to do it. You can just answer the questions and kind of go through the process, and it will spit something out at the other end, which will be persona-like. This was a new entry last year, Spark Toro. This is insanely good, but also it's expensive. I think there's a free trial, but I think it's no. In fact, I don't even want to say because I'll get it wrong. I don't want to set any expectations. What it does is, and I'll go to this page here. It takes a phrase that you have searched on. So I searched on fertility treatment here, and then it scours the internet. And I don't know how it does this. It's incredible what it does. It finds all of the people that are talking about your topic. So here you can see that 4,500 people are talking about fertility treatment. And then if I scroll down, it gives you information like what words those people have in their biographies on places like X, what hashtags they're using, what frequently used phrases. And then if you would scroll down even further, it shows you the social accounts that they follow. And if I come down even further, the websites that they go to, the YouTube channels they subscribe to, the podcasts they listen to. Like literally mind-blowing, this stuff. Now, if you think about what I've just told you about personas, some of this information can literally just be lifted and put into those documents that we have created. Okay, so those persona documents, to make them richer, because we're now using tools like this to make that process even better and the output even better. So Spark Toro, very good new addition. Yeah, but also mindful of the fact it's quite expensive. So remember me saying this is where it gets scary. Enter ChatGPT. Now, I don't want to kind of, if we were face to face, I'd probably ask you whether you're using it and stuff. And I don't know what the answer to that question would be in a group such as this. I'd imagine that some of you are using it, some of you might not be. Just in case anyone doesn't even know what it is, it's OpenAI. So OpenAI is an organization. It's their chatbot, which they launched December, not last year, the year before. And it took the world by storm. It got to 100 million users in 60 days, which is far faster than anything else before it on any kind of other platform, social media or otherwise. And it allows you to access these things called large language models, which basically are lots of information that these tools have been trained on: books, Wikipedia sites, the internet, lots of different things. So I'm going to use ChatGPT for a few things now, which I think are interesting. I also am going to caveat this, or put in a disclaimer at this stage, which is really important. So please take note of this. Do not give AI currently anything confidential. Do not give it confidential information. I know a lot of legal people, legal professionals in this space who do not know where this information is going. You know, there are tools out there that are claiming that it goes nowhere. But I think for the purpose of everything we're going to talk about here, do not give it confidential information. Okay. So what I had did with this tool is I haven't told it how I've done anything. I've just told it what I've come up with. So I've explained to ChatGPT that I've developed this AI method of identifying sperm. So basically took the example you looked at earlier on, and I copied into ChatGPT. And ChatGPT wrote back to me saying, your AI technology has the potential to revolutionize the fertility industry. Thank you very much. I think so too. And there are multiple personas who might be interested. So I've asked it to create me personas. And here we go. It's come up with these: fertility clinics and laboratories, gynecologists, fertility specialists, healthcare institutions, insurance companies, and the list goes on. So that's really interesting, because the personas that it has come up with off the back of literally that tiny explanation up there are quite good. Now, I always think with AI, and I don't know if, no, I don't put it here, but I always think with AI, the most important thing to do is ensure that it understands you best before you start asking it questions. So if I was doing this properly, I would spend a lot more time giving it more information so that it's better in its responses. You can also bake this stuff in now. So there's this bit called custom instructions on ChatGPT, so that you don't have to keep telling it who you are and what you do and your background and everything like that. Remember, not confidential stuff. So it's all in the settings. And that means that every time I use it, it remembers who I am and what my company is and all that kind of stuff. So I asked it to create me a persona for point one. Now, point one was fertility clinics, I think. So it started to write back saying, sure, I can help create a detailed persona for fertility clinics. Let's call it Dr. Sarah White. And here we go, Dr. Sarah White. Oh, California, US. That's not great for me. So can we make this a European persona, please? Yeah, no problem. Now changes to Dr. Laura Schneider in Germany. Don't be afraid to tell it what's right, what's not right for you. And it goes into kind of background, responsibilities, goals, challenges, interests. It even then tells me how my AI technology could be useful to Dr. Schneider. Again, remember, this is off that single paragraph of explanation. So tools like this are helping us to create things that would have taken us hours, maybe even days before, in literally seconds and minutes. Are they perfect? No. But are they a good start? Absolutely. And I always think with AI that, again, it gets you into that kind of first step, or gets you past that kind of first step. And then you can do stuff like this. What sort of websites would Dr. Schneider go to? And here we go. It goes and scours the internet, and it finds all of the big websites in the fertility industry that people like, or in the medical industry that people like Dr. Schneider might go to. So using or putting ChatGPT or AI, I mean, if you have a preference over some other tool like Bard or Copilot or anything like that, that's fine as well, because they all sit and work in similar ways. But using technology like that to help you understand things like personas and competitors and websites that are key for those personas is a really big part of this process. The A stands for awareness raising. Now, there's a concept here which is really important to define. Inbound marketing. Let's take the word marketing out for a second, inbound. So when you think about outbound marketing, for a sec, let's go back to marketing. When you think about outbound marketing, I think TV, radio, PR. When you do those types of marketing, you hope to hit the right people. You hope that your TV advert is seen by someone that's sat on their sofa at night, watching another program that just so happens to want your product or whatever it is. That's outbound marketing. Inbound marketing is where you know that there are all these people that need what you've got or what you're selling. And what you do is you create something that is so useful or educational that those people are basically pulled towards you, usually via search engines or social media sites by people asking for recommendations. And the same concept, I think, applies in this space. We have a technology, we have an area of research we want people to look for. And there are probably people out there looking for it. Maybe they don't know exactly what it is that exists, but they're looking around the periphery and they're searching on certain phrases. What we can do here is get those people and bring them into us. Now, really, it's about having a space in the middle, which you can put your information. Now, I've used ChatGPT here to create me a website, essentially. So I've said, look, I want a website to showcase my technology. It's come up with a load of pages for the ideas. If I wanted to scroll down there, it's even got examples like, put a newsletter sign up, a demo request form, search function, things like that. It's very clever. You could go on actually and use tool or variants ChatGPT to actually design you the site if you wanted to as well. Now, in your instance, you might be better served by going to the university and putting this information on the university website, because the university website is a high authority site. If you create a new website, it's got no authority. So you have to work that out. I don't know the answer to that for you guys. But what I do know is that whether you're putting it on your own website or the university website, you could use ChatGPT to help you with things like, what sort of phrases should I put into my website to make sure that when people search on it in Google, they find me. And here's an example of me doing just that. Oh yeah, there's this other very cool tool here. So this tool here basically tells us what people are searching on, again, through Google, and it tells you the questions by the words how, which, where, when, why, etc. So in this example, you can start to understand what people are out there searching for. So this is an example. What is the age limit for fertility treatment? If I know that there's lots of people out there searching on that, and I answer that on my website, I'm going to pull those people towards me. That's just an example of people using ChatGPT to do that. Don't forget to consider in your market putting content onto other people's websites. So not just your site or your university site. Think about who are the authoritative websites, the most important sites in the space that you are working within, researching, creating technology. Find out where those sites are, and then consider whether you can reach out to them and offer them content, because they already have the audience that you want. So in this example here, I found a website called Fertility Network in the UK, and I found this expert column section. I'm an expert in this space. Obviously I'm not, but in this example I am. So I can go to this place and suggest to them, I'd like to write an article for you about this particular technology that I've created. And there's a very good chance that they will put that onto there because they have an expert column section. And don't be afraid to reach out to these people. They quite often like people doing this. So the point here is to have this space online to point people back to. And then the final two sections are relatively quick. I realize I'm running out of time a little bit, actually, so I'm going to be quite quick for you here. But the contact finding, so this is all about finding people. I summarize this into three areas: watering holes, influencers, and your own network. Watering holes are basically places online where people hang out. So I've got examples here for Reddit. There's a fertility subreddit here with 101,000 members. Here's one supporting your IVF journey with 27,000 members. Here's a LinkedIn group with lots of fertility groups, lots of people that are joining these groups that are interested in fertility. Here's Facebook again, and I've shown a local Facebook group here. Podcasts, they might be an example of a watering hole. But I think there's one thing that links all of this. These spaces, they have lots of people, probably far too many to kind of contact. What you might be interested in is who created them, who runs the podcast. You can see there the names actually of that podcast. Who created that group on Facebook? Who created the group on LinkedIn or that subreddit? Those are the people that I would focus in on. I'm not going to go for the 101,000. I'm going to go for the one. And think about that person, because you know that that person is probably very interested in this particular space. So watering holes do provide this opportunity to find these relevant contacts. Influencers is a tricky one. I don't actually think I think it's okay to know about it. You know, who are the key people with massive followings? You know, you could ask ChatGPT to find out, or you can use tools like BuzzSumo. BuzzSumo will show you bloggers, influencers, companies with big followings. The trouble is with this is that these people have huge followings and probably have lots of people going after them as well. When I did this project for fertility, BuzzSumo showed me these people for TikTok. And you can see here, the number of people that follow these people on TikTok is ridiculous. 2.9 million followers for the first one. You know, are they going to respond to me if I try and reach out to them about this research or technology? Probably not. But it's worth knowing that these tools do exist, so you can use them if you want to. And the final section in this bit, and this is probably the most important one in this part, is this using your networks. So who do you have within your own network already? You know, I think this is probably the most important part that I would focus in on if I were you. So I use Sales Navigator here in this example, and I search on the word fertility, and I search with my second line connections. And you can see here this lady, Tess Isabel Cassad, of a company called Bayer Fertility, pops up. Now, I do not know Tess, I promise you. Interestingly, she went to the same university as me, but I promise you I don't know her. So Sales Navigator shows me how I'm linked to her and what my relationship with her is, if there is any. It also provides me with a load of people that could introduce me to Tess if I wanted to speak to her. So maybe she's somebody who I want to talk to about this AI technology and just gauge her opinion on, you know, what she thinks of it. Now, here's I promise you a true story. Have a look at the date on this. So this actually happened on this date. So I viewed her profile on the 21st of May, 2023. On the 22nd of May, I logged into LinkedIn completely separately, and I saw this post pop up. It says Nick Baxter shared about starting a new position as an investor at Bayer Fertility. That's the company that Tess runs. Nick Baxter is one of my best friends, and here is a WhatsApp of him showing me what, you know, him and his family in Copenhagen one day, just to prove that he is. I would never ever have guessed that he would be linked to that company, let alone Tess, She was a complete random that I picked. And whenever I run these projects, and I've done it a few times, there's always something like this that happens. And it always sends me the same message, which is you just never know who you are connected to until you start looking. It's fascinating using tools like Sales Navigator to see who you are connected to. You can also do it with a university, by the way. So if you have, if you go to the university page, there's a section called alumni here. And what LinkedIn lets you do is search the alumni, which is amazing. So I've actually searched X University, which is 189,000 people, for the word fertility. And you can see it's now got 53. And if I were to scroll down, there you go, Tess again, because she went to that university, and all the other people that I could reach out to who have been to the same university as me. So that's a great place to start. If you want conversations with people that have been linked to the university, then you can search that using LinkedIn. Loads of people don't even know that exists. So work out those contact spheres and who you're linked to. And it brings us to this final piece, and the final piece is very, very short and quick. So it's about tailored conversations. It's the T. And it really is down to one tool that I want to focus in on, which is this tool called Crystal Knows. It's quite spooky. It's a Google Chrome plugin that sits on top of LinkedIn. It reads the LinkedIn profile that you're looking at, and then it tries to work out the personality profile of the person it's looking at from the content they share. So you can see here that here's me looking at Tess, and over on the right hand side you can see it's saying that she is what's called a DI initiator. If I were to scroll down, this is the kind of information it gives me. So it tells me what to do if I'm emailing Tess, tells me what to do when I'm meeting Tess, tells me what to do when I'm speaking to Tess. And then even more importantly, if I were to go to another page, if I were to run a demo on my technology for Tess, it gives me information like this, that she wants to learn through doing, not watching me doing it. Little pieces of information like that from tools like this might just give you the edge over other people. So understanding that they exist and that you can use them will give you a better chance, I think, of having quality conversations when you do get through to the person that you've wanted to talk to. Yeah, I'll show you, quickly say what this is. If you know the website of someone you want to reach out to, but you don't know their email address, you can use hunter.io to give you the best chance of guessing what the person's email address is. So here you can see my email address, and basically it's gone off and it looked around the internet. It's found all these references to people at Optix Solutions and said, if you wanted to reach out to Alastair at Optix Solutions, because you know my name, the chances are on my email address is alastair@Optix Solutions. It is, by the way. So that's quite a useful tool as well. So in summary, we started at the beginning by talking about these generations and the multiple generations that exist in our approach. Are you thinking about those people? You know, if you apply the same thing to someone who's 18 to 25 to someone who's 50, it's not going to land in the same way. So you have to think about that. You then go about setting up the tools to organize and automate your processes. Use the search tools like Google, like Bing, even ChatGPT these days, to search for information and immerse yourself in the market space that you are operating or potentially going to operate in. Think about those personas. Who do you need to talk to? If you don't do this, you end up talking to everybody or potentially nobody. So having a clear idea of who you're trying to target is really important. Then you can set up your platform, whether it's on the university site or creating your own website. Have somewhere that you can push people back to is really important. Think about when they get there, what type of content is going to attract those people? What is helpful? What's useful? What's educational? Does it answer people's problems, challenges, pains? Build those lists in Sales Navigator of people that you would like to speak to about the research that you're doing or the technology you're creating, in order that you can maybe solve problems now or work out new problems that you didn't even know existed as you go through your research, rather than trying to work that out later, later date. And ensure you give yourself the best chance of engagement by you thinking about or using tools like Crystal Knows in that whole process. So that's the fire hose done. And as I say, I've run over slightly and I do apologize for that. But yeah, as you can probably tell, I get quite passionate about this. I really feel like the tools that I've just given you are ones that should really, really help supercharge everything that you do.
Thank you very much, Alastair, for your presentation.